Why do the biggest mistakes always begin with the smallest choices? Claire never thought one simple decision, lingering after work, would change her life. She was not the kind of woman who stayed late at the office. She liked routine, safety, and the quiet walk home with the city lights blinking around her. But that night, the building felt different. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe the loneliness of her desk under the dim fluorescent glow. Whatever the reason, Claire found herself still sitting there long after everyone else had left. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, though her work was already done. She told herself she was just tying up loose ends. But deep down, she knew she was waiting for something she couldn't name. The hum of the city outside reached her through the tall windows. Cars rushed by below, their headlights flickering like fleeting stars. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. That was when her eyes drifted to the hallway. The row of glass offices stretched like a line of empty mirrors. All were dark except one. A soft light spilled from behind a half-closed door at the far end. Daniel's office. Her heart gave a nervous flutter. Daniel, the man she worked for, the man everyone admired. He was more than a boss to the company. He was its anchor. Confident, collected, untouchable. He had that rare kind of presence that filled a room without words. Employees admired him, whispered about him, and respected him. Claire was no different. She stood, gathering her bag, but her eyes lingered on the faint glow. It was late, much later than he ever stayed. She hesitated. Maybe he had left and forgotten to turn off the lamp. Or maybe he was still inside. Do you ever feel pulled towards something you know you should resist? Her feet carried her down the corridor before her mind caught up. Each step echoed too loudly against the polished floor. The hallway smelled, faintly of paper and coffee, a scent that always clung to long nights. Her fingers brushed along the cool glass as she passed office after office, the silence wrapping around her like a warning. When she reached his door, she stopped. The light from the desk lamp spilled across the carpet, casting a narrow triangle onto the hall. Her hand hovered near the handle. She told herself it wasn't her business, that she should just go home. But her curiosity pressed against her chest like a weight. She had always wondered about him. Not in the way of gossip, but in the way one wonders about a locked book with golden edges. Daniel kept his life private, his heart guarded. To the world, he was a man of sharp suits and calm words. But Claire sometimes noticed the quiet moments, the way he stared at his coffee before meetings, the silence in his office after phone calls. There was something more there, something hidden. Her hand trembled as it touched the cool metal handle. What if the moment you open a door, your world changes forever? The sound of the latch was soft, almost guilty. She pushed the door and it creaked open just enough to let her see. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel was there, not typing, not on the phone, not working. He sat at his desk, shoulders slightly hunched, a single lamp illuminating the space around him. His hands weren't on the computer. They were holding something, a photograph. He wasn't the man she saw during the day, strong and composed. His face was bare, unguarded, filled with an expression so raw it pierced her. She froze in the doorway. For a heartbeat, she thought about pulling back, pretending she had never been there. But the door had already betrayed her. The faint creak made him look up. Their eyes met. What do you do when someone's truth collides with your mistake? Claire's pulse thundered in her ears. Daniel's gaze locked onto her, sharp but wounded. The photograph slipped from his hand onto the desk. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, filling every corner of the office. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had never seen him like this. Not Daniel, the man who ran meetings without a crack in his voice. Not Daniel, the man who carried authority like second skin. This was someone else, someone fragile. His voice finally broke the silence. Claire, Just her name, but heavy, as if it carried more than he wanted to admit. She swallowed, her fingers gripping the doorframe. I thought maybe you left the light on. Her words sounded thin, excuses tangled in fear. But Daniel didn't move, didn't blink away the vulnerability she had caught him in. He looked at her as if deciding whether to push her away or let her see what she never should. The lamp flickered slightly, shadows shifting across his face. Claire's heart pounded harder, telling her she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And in that suspended second, before either of them spoke again, she realized the mistake wasn't opening the door. The mistake was wanting to stay. What would you do if you saw a side of someone they never wanted revealed? Claire stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still clutching the handle, as if the cool metal could steady her racing pulse. Daniel didn't move. He sat there, shoulders heavy, eyes tired, staring at her like she had stepped into a place she had no right to be. The office, usually a space of order and power, now felt like something entirely different. Too intimate, too raw. The silence between them stretched, thick enough to crush words before they could leave her mouth. Her eyes flicked downward, unable to stop herself. The photograph lay face up on the desk. A woman's smile shone back at her, delicate and full of life. Claire's chest tightened. Whoever she wasn't just anyone. The way Daniel had been looking at the picture told her enough. She should leave. She should apologize, close the door, and run before the silence became unbearable. But her feet refused to move. Something in the room held her still, as though stepping away now would mean closing the door on more than just his office. Why is it that curiosity always outweighs caution? Claire, Daniel finally said again, his voice low, almost hoarse. You shouldn't be here. Her name sounded different this time. Not sharp, not commanding, but heavy. Weighted with something she couldn't name. She opened her mouth, fumbling for an explanation, but the truth came out instead. I thought the light was left on. I didn't mean to intrude. His eyes softened for the briefest second, and then hardened again, as if pulling shutters down over open windows. And yet, you did. She flinched at the quiet finality of his words, but beneath them, she heard something else. Not anger, not frustration, just hurt. It was a strange thing to recognize in him, the man who never let anything show. She glanced again at the photograph before she could stop herself. She's important to you. The words slipped out, reckless and uninvited. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached for the photo, holding it with a tenderness that nearly broke her. His eyes flicked up to hers, sharp but trembling underneath. For a moment, it seemed like he might shut her out completely, send her away with nothing but silence. But instead, he said something she never expected. Yes. Just that one word. Simple. Bare. But it was enough to unravel something in the air between them. Have you ever seen someone's strength collapse in front of you? Claire took a slow step forward. The office felt colder, heavier, as though carrying the weight of his unspoken story. Daniel sat straighter, trying to gather the composure he wore so naturally in daylight, but his eyes betrayed him. They were tired, shadowed with memories. I shouldn't have stayed, she whispered. Then why did you? His question was soft, but it landed like a challenge. She blinked, caught off guard. I don't know. But that wasn't true. She knew. She had noticed him before in quiet ways, noticing the pauses in his words during meetings, the faint shadows beneath his eyes, the way he carried something unseen. And tonight, standing in the threshold of his office, she couldn't walk away. Something inside her wouldn't let her. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temple with his free hand. People think I'm untouchable, that I have everything together. That's what they see. His gaze fell back on the photograph, his voice dropping lower. But they don't know what's missing. The vulnerability in his words unsettled her. Claire had never seen him like this, never even imagined it. He wasn't just a boss anymore, or the man who could command a room with one look. He was human, wounded, and sitting alone in his office because he didn't want the world to see. Who was she? The question slipped out before Claire could stop herself. Daniel froze. His fingers tightened around the frame of the photograph. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer, that he would dismiss her with silence and send her out the door. But then he looked up, eyes darker than she had ever seen. She was someone I wasn't ready to lose. The weight of his words filled the room. Claire's breath caught. He didn't say her name, didn't give details, but the grief in his tone told her everything she needed to know. Whoever the woman was, she had been his everything, and she was gone. What happens when you learn the person you admire is broken too? Claire's throat felt tight. She wanted to say something, anything, to take away the pain carved into his features. But what words could possibly matter? None. So she stayed quiet, letting the silence settle around them. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling as though speaking had drained him. His hand brushed over the edge of the photograph, then let it fall face down on the desk. His eyes, when they returned to hers, were guarded again. He had closed the door she had accidentally opened. "You should go," he said quietly. This isn't for you to see." The words stung, though she knew he was right. She had no place in this part of his life. She was just his employee, another face in the company, another person who admired him from a distance. But something inside her resisted leaving. "I don't think anyone should carry something like that alone," she said softly, surprising even herself. His expression flickered. For a heartbeat, the shutters in his eyes lifted, revealing a storm beneath. But just as quickly they fell back down. He shook his head, his voice rough. "You don't understand. Some things can't be shared. Not without breaking everything." Her heart raced. He wasn't talking about her specifically, but it felt like he was. She nodded slowly, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag. "Maybe. But sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that need to be spoken the most." The words hung between them, trembling, daring. Daniel didn't answer. His silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with things he wouldn't say, couldn't say. Claire stepped back toward the door, but her eyes stayed on him. And in that lingering moment, she realized the mistake wasn't just walking into his office. The real mistake was feeling the pull she couldn't explain. The strange connection forming in the silence. The beginning of something she knew could only end in trouble. Her hand found the doorknob again. She hesitated, waiting, hoping he might say something, anything, to stop her from leaving. But Daniel looked away. And that silence was the cliff she was now standing on. Ready to fall. Is it possible to fall for someone just by seeing their pain? Claire didn't sleep that night. The image of Daniel in his office, sitting in the half-light with that photograph, stayed with her long after she left the building. She replayed his words in her mind, every tone heavy with grief. She had stepped into something she didn't understand, something personal and fragile. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Not as her boss, not as the powerful man who seemed untouchable, but as someone broken, carrying a story that haunted him. The next morning, the office felt different. People moved around with their usual chatter, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, but Claire's eyes kept drifting toward Daniel's door. He was there, just like always, calm and composed. No one else would know what she had seen the night before. No one else would believe he wasn't as strong as he looked. She told herself to stay quiet, to keep her distance. But her heart kept pulling her closer. Why do some truths refuse to stay hidden once they're revealed? That afternoon, Claire found herself standing outside his office again, her pulse quickening. She knocked softly, almost hoping he wouldn't hear. But his voice came, calm and steady. "Come in." Daniel looked up from his desk, and for a moment their eyes locked. His mask was back on, but she could see the faint cracks. "Yes, Claire?" he asked, professional, as if nothing had happened the night before. She hesitated, her voice catching. "About yesterday? I didn't mean to—" He stopped her with a slight shake of his head. "We don't need to talk about it," but she couldn't hold back. "I think maybe we do." His jaw tightened. He leaned back, studying her. The silence stretched between them, until finally, with a heavy sigh, he spoke. "She was my fiancée." His voice was even, but his eyes betrayed the storm underneath. "Her name was Anna. She died 2 years ago." The words hit Claire like a wave. She had suspected loss, but hearing it aloud made her chest ache. She lowered her gaze, not wanting him to see the tears burning in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Daniel's hand rested on the desk, fingers curling as though gripping something invisible. "I never told anyone here. They only see what I want them to. But at night, when the office is empty—" He trailed off, his voice breaking in the middle. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to step closer, to reach across the desk, to offer comfort. But what right did she have? She was just his employee, a stranger in his personal storm. And yet, something in his eyes pulled her in, made her want to stay even when she knew she shouldn't. How do you stop your heart from moving closer to someone who is still holding on to the past? Daniel leaned back in his chair, looking at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You don't need to carry this with me, Claire," he said softly. "It's not your burden." Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "Maybe not, but nobody should carry something like that alone." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face, something between gratitude and fear. His walls wavered, as if he wanted to push her away but couldn't quite do it. He let out a quiet laugh, bitter and broken. "You don't know what you're saying. I wake up every day still in love with someone I can never have again. How could you understand that?" His honesty cut her. She had never seen him like this, raw, unshielded, vulnerable. And it made her heart ache in ways she didn't expect. She wanted to tell him she understood loneliness, that she knew the weight of silence. But the words caught in her throat. All she managed was, "Maybe I don't understand everything, but I see you. And sometimes, that's enough." Daniel's eyes locked onto hers, searching. It was as if the air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken things. Claire's pulse quickened, her breath unsteady. She could feel something changing, something dangerous and undeniable. What if comfort turns into something neither person is ready for? The silence in the room grew louder, pressing against both of them. Claire stepped closer, unsure if it was courage or recklessness that moved her feet. Daniel didn't stop her. His eyes followed her every step, torn between warning and wanting. "You shouldn't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "This isn't right." Her chest tightened, but her voice came out steady. "I'm not here to make it right. I'm just here." For a heartbeat, his defenses dropped. She saw it. The man beneath the grief, the one who longed for connection but was too afraid to reach for it. And in that fleeting moment, Claire felt the pull of something bigger than her, something she couldn't fight. Daniel closed his eyes, as if battling himself. "You don't know what you're doing, Claire. You deserve someone whole, not someone broken, still chained to a ghost." Her heart ached at his words, but her resolve didn't falter. Maybe, but broken people still need someone to care. When his eyes opened again, they were filled with conflict, pain, longing, fear. He looked at her like she was both salvation and danger. The air between them grew charged, every second stretching like a wire pulled too tight. And then, Daniel pushed his chair back, standing quickly, putting distance between them. "This has to stop," he said firmly, though his voice trembled. "Whatever this is, it can't happen." Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't asking for forever, only for honesty. But his face was already turning away, his walls rebuilding faster than she could tear them down. Her breath hitched, her heart pounding. She had seen the truth behind his mask, touched the wound he kept hidden. And now she knew something dangerous. She wanted more. But Daniel's next words shattered her hope. "Go, Claire, please, before I let myself do something I can't undo." Her feet felt heavy as she backed toward the door, her chest aching with every step. His voice lingered in her ears, raw and pleading. She knew he meant it as protection, as a warning. But to her heart, it felt like rejection, and it cut deeper than she expected. Her hand found the doorknob. She hesitated, waiting, hoping he would stop her, that he would call her back. But the silence swallowed everything. When the door closed behind her, Claire knew one thing for certain. She had crossed into something she could never walk away from, and Daniel was the one who had unknowingly pulled her. There, what happens when the line between right and wrong blurs with every heartbeat? Claire could still hear the sound of the door closing behind her that night. It echoed in her head like a final warning, sharp and cold. She walked home under the city lights, but everything around her felt distant. Her chest was heavy, her steps unsteady. She told herself she shouldn't feel this way. He was her boss, he was still grieving, and she had no place in his broken heart. And yet, her thoughts kept circling back to him, to the pain in his eyes, to the way his voice had cracked when he told her to leave. By morning, she tried to bury it. She told herself to stay professional, to pretend nothing had happened. She put on her best smile, grabbed her coffee, and sat at her desk. But when Daniel walked in, calm and composed, pretending as if nothing had happened, her heart twisted. He looked exactly like the man everyone admired, confident, controlled, unreachable. But Claire knew better now. She had seen the storm beneath, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. How do you work beside someone who feels like both a secret and a mistake? The hours dragged by. Claire typed reports, answered emails, joined meetings. But every time Daniel spoke, every time his voice reached her across the room, she felt that same pull. It was maddening. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. She wasn't supposed to notice the way his gaze lingered a second too long, the way his hand brushed through his hair when he was frustrated, the way his silence carried weight. That afternoon, she was asked to drop some documents off in his office. Her stomach tightened as she approached the door. She told herself to just leave the folder and go. Nothing more, nothing less. But when she stepped inside, Daniel looked up. Their eyes met, and for a second the air thickened. He leaned back, studying her, as if trying to decide what to say. She placed the folder on his desk, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, forcing herself to turn away. But just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Claire!" She froze. Slowly, she turned back. His expression was conflicted, torn between the mask he wore and the truth he couldn't hide. "You should know." He hesitated, running a hand along the edge of the desk. "I meant what I said the other night. This, whatever it feels like, it can't happen." Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't have to push her away. But before she could speak, his eyes softened. "And yet," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about it either." The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. What if two hearts move closer, even when both know they shouldn't? Claire's breath caught. She had been waiting, without realizing it, for him to say something like that. Her heart raced, torn between fear and longing. She took a cautious step forward, her voice trembling. "Then why are you fighting it?" Daniel shook his head, his eyes dark with conflict. "Because it's wrong. You deserve someone who isn't trapped in the past, and I don't know if I can ever give more than pieces of myself." His honesty was a knife and a balm all at once. She hated that he was right, and yet she couldn't step away. "Maybe I don't want perfect," she whispered. "Maybe I just want real." The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel's jaw tightened, his breath uneven. He looked at her like she was both a temptation and a lifeline. The walls he had built seemed to tremble under the weight of the moment. Claire's pulse hammered. She didn't move closer, but she didn't step back either. They stood there, suspended in something that felt inevitable. And then Daniel broke the silence. "If we cross this line," he said quietly, "there's no going back. Not for you, not for me." Her heart thundered in her chest. She knew he was right. Everything would change. Their work, their trust, their futures. But still, she found herself saying, maybe it's already too late. What if one moment of honesty changes everything? Daniel's eyes searched hers, desperate and conflicted. He looked like a man at war with himself, torn between duty and desire, past and present. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach for her, but couldn't allow himself. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered. That's all I've done, to people I love. Hurt them, lose them. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he wasn't just loss and mistakes. But words felt too small for the storm in the room. Instead, she whispered back, maybe you don't have to push me away to protect me. Maybe letting someone in is the only way you'll heal. The weight of her words filled the air. Daniel inhaled sharply, closing his eyes, as though her honesty cut deeper than silence ever could. When he opened them again, they were filled with something she hadn't seen before. Longing, raw and unguarded. For one breathless moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to the space between them. No office, no rules, no company. Just him and her, standing on the edge of something they weren't supposed to want. And then, just when Claire thought he might step closer, Daniel turned away. He ran a hand over his face, shaking his head. This isn't fair to you, he muttered. You shouldn't be caught in my past. The rejection stung, even though it was gentle. Claire's heart ached, torn between understanding his fear and resenting it. She stepped back, her hand brushing the doorframe. You can keep pushing me away, Daniel, she whispered, but that doesn't change what's already there. And sometimes, the scariest cliffhanger is the silence that follows love left unspoken. Daniel didn't reply. He stood there, his back to her, shoulders tense as if holding 1,000 unsaid words. The office felt colder now, the lamp on his desk casting long shadows across the floor. Claire's chest ached as she realized he wasn't going to turn around. Her hand tightened on the door handle. She wanted him to stop her, to say something that would pull her back. But he didn't. And as she stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, Claire understood the truth she had been afraid to admit. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Because no matter how much Daniel tried to fight it, no matter how many walls he built, the pull between them had already been set in motion. And sooner or later, one of them was going to break. Is it possible to fall for someone just by seeing their pain? Claire hadn't planned on going back to Daniel's office. After that night, when she had stumbled onto his secret and seen him holding that photograph, she told herself to stay away. To bury the moment. To pretend she had never seen the rawness in his eyes. But the truth lingered like a shadow. Every time she walked into work, every time she heard his voice in meetings, every time she saw him pass by in the hall, it tugged at her. She had seen behind the mask, and once you saw the cracks in someone's armor, you couldn't unsee them. She spent the next day pretending she was fine, typing reports, making small talk with coworkers, smiling when she needed to, but her thoughts never stopped circling around him. The image of Daniel sitting alone in that half-lit office haunted her, as if his sadness had somehow reached across the room and wrapped around her heart. By late afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. Her steps carried her down the hall, her chest tight with nerves, until she stood once more outside his door. Why do we step closer to the very things we know we should avoid? She knocked softly. For a moment she almost prayed he wouldn't answer, but then came the sound of his voice, calm and steady. Come in. Claire pushed the door open. Daniel looked up from his desk and their eyes met. He was composed again, every bit the man people respected. Calm, collected, unreadable. But Claire knew better. She had seen the storm behind his eyes, and it made her chest ache. Yes, Claire? He asked, tone clipped, professional, as though nothing had ever happened. Her throat tightened. About the other night, she began, unsure how to put her feelings into words. But he cut her off with a shake of his head. We don't need to talk about it. She swallowed hard. Maybe we do, his jaw tightened. He leaned back, folding his arms, studying her carefully. Silence filled the room, stretching between them, until finally he let out a long sigh. She was my fiancée, he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years. Claire's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to confess so quickly, to hand her the truth so openly. How do you respond when someone finally lays their wound bare? Her name was Anna, Daniel continued, his voice low and steady, though Claire could hear the cracks beneath it. She was everything. Smart, kind, impossible not to love. We were going to be married. He paused, his gaze dropping to the desk, as if looking anywhere but at her. 2 years ago, she died, car accident. 1 phone call and my entire world was gone. Claire's chest tightened. She hadn't expected the pain to hit her too, but it did. She could see it in him, carved into every line of his face. This wasn't just loss. It was a wound that never healed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's fingers brushed against the edge of the desk. "I don't tell people. They don't need to know. They look at me and see someone strong, in control. But at night, when the office is empty, when there's no one left to impress, that's when it comes back. That's when she comes back." His honesty was like a knife, sharp and unguarded. Claire's throat burned. She wanted to reach across the desk, to touch his hand, to tell him he wasn't alone. But she stayed still, afraid one wrong move would make him retreat behind his walls again. What if the more someone resists, the more you feel drawn to them? "You don't need to hear this," Daniel said finally, shaking his head. "It's not your burden to carry." Her heart thudded in her chest. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you should carry it alone." His eyes flicked up to hers, sharp and unreadable. For a moment she thought he might laugh or dismiss her. Instead, he said, "You don't understand. When you love someone that deeply, and they're ripped away from you, the guilt, the emptiness, it doesn't go away. I wake up every morning and it feels like I'm betraying her just by breathing." Claire's chest ached. She had never heard him speak like this. The man who commanded boardrooms, who made decisions without blinking, was unraveling right in front of her. And strangely, instead of pushing her away, it pulled her closer. "I may not understand everything," she said softly, "but I see you. And maybe, sometimes that's enough." His eyes locked onto hers. For a moment it felt as though the air between them shifted. Something passed through it. Something dangerous. Something neither of them wanted to name. When does sympathy turn into something more? Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "You deserve better than this," he muttered. "Better than someone who's still holding on to a ghost." Claire's hands trembled at her sides. "Maybe, but broken people still need someone, even if it's just to listen." Her words hung in the room, trembling like fragile glass. His gaze softened, and for the first time since she entered, the walls around him seemed to waver. "Why are you doing this?" he asked suddenly, his voice rough. "Why are you here? You should walk out that door and never look back." She swallowed, her throat dry. "Because I don't want to." The silence that followed was suffocating. His eyes searched hers, conflicted, desperate. And then, slowly, he stood from his chair. The movement was sudden, sharp, like he was trying to break the moment before it broke him. "This has to stop," he said firmly, though his voice trembled at the edges. "Whatever this is, it can't happen. Not now. Not ever." Claire's chest twisted, but she stayed rooted to the spot. "Then why does it feel like it already has?" His face shifted, as though her words cut through the last of his defenses. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, his shoulders tense. "Because I can't let it. Not when I know how this story ends. What if walking away hurts more than staying?" Claire took a step forward, her voice steady now. "Maybe you're right. Maybe this is a mistake. But I can't pretend I don't feel it." His breath hitched. For a moment, she thought he might turn back, might finally let go of the fear holding him hostage. But instead, he shook his head, his voice barely audible. "Go, Claire, please, before I let myself do something I can't undo." The words crushed her. They weren't sharp or cruel. They were pleading. A man begging not for her to stay, but for her to save him from himself. Her chest burned as she backed toward the door. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. She wanted him to stop her, to call her name, to give her even the smallest reason to stay. But the silence was absolute. She reached for the handle, her heart hammering, and looked at him one last time. His back was to her, his shoulders hunched, his hand pressed against the desk as if holding himself together. She knew then that this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Because once you saw someone's truth, you couldn't just walk away. But for now, she had no choice. She opened the door, stepped out into the quiet hallway, and closed it softly behind her. And as the sound of the latch clicked into place, Claire realized something terrifying. The mistake wasn't just opening his door that night. The real mistake was the way her heart now belonged to a man who didn't know if he could ever love again.